Hello, foolish mortals. Come take a seat. It's skincare with a scare, a spooky treat. I'll share eerie tales while my skin's on fleek. Bright and fresh skin. What more could you seek? Do you like my rhymes? Do you like my rhymes before each skincare with a scare? I hope you do. Okay, hi, welcome. My name is Kayleigh Long, and this is Skincare with a Scare, where I read scary stories on the internet and I touch my face and do skincare. Is there anything different about me? Do you notice anything different? I'm not wearing a black shirt, right? Wrong, I got bangs. I cut them myself. Do you think they look good? I think they look good. I like them, that's all that matters. My opinion of myself. I'm wearing a Whitney Houston shirt, love her. I was looking at some of my past videos and it's kind of hard to tell them apart because I only wear black t-shirts. So I was like, let me wear a color. I need to invest in colorful clothing. Yeah, I struggle a little. But yes, I cut my own bangs. I used to have bangs 3 years ago. I got bangs in 2019, right before the pandemic. And then I had them, I guess, during the pandemic. And then in 2021, I was like, I'll grow them out. But I decided to bring them back now that I have red hair. All right, say goodbye to the bangs. I'm just gonna push these back. That's perfect, okay. And you know this look from past videos. Oh, also, could you tell? What was that? Tell? My nails are done. My nails are never done. You wanna know why my nails are done? Why are your nails done? I booked a commercial. If you don't know, in addition to creating spooky content, I'm also an actress. And I booked my first commercial this past week and it filmed, and they paid for me to get my nails done, to film everything. Say goodbye to the makeup while I tell you about it. Things move very quickly in the entertainment industry. My agent sent me this audition 2-ish weeks ago. I'll make a whole video about this experience because I learned so much. It was wonderful. I had my fitting and then we filmed for 2 days and it was wonderful. It just makes me want to work as an actor all the time. It was really cool. I'm really grateful for the experience. I'll tell you all about it when I can, you know? We're just gonna wait till it goes live. So, that's how my nails are done. Super cute. I feel like such a girl. Last time I had my nails done was like 2021. I think I had bangs last time I had my nails professionally done. So, skincare with a scare. Let's talk about it. So today we will be reading from the Reddit thread Scary Stories again. If you have any Reddit threads or stories you would like me to read, please comment it down below. Also, if you're new, subscribe. If you want, it's free. You can come and go as you please, but it really helps my channel. And also while you're at it, give this video a quick little like. Also free, costs you nothing, but helps me out, so thanks. I think that's all the life updates I have. Still gotta figure out a Halloween costume. I have like this idea, but I've had no time to go shopping. Like I'm busy as is, and then booking the commercial on top of everything. It was like, well, so now I had no time before, but now there is extra no time. I gotta figure that one out. Do you have a Halloween costume? Let me know what it is. I try and do things that are like funny, relevant, pop culture moments. I was a handsome Squidward. I'll post that video somewhere. That was really fun. Year before last, I got sick, which I literally bought a wedding dress off of Amazon and dyed it blue because I was gonna be corpse bride and like do the whole thing. But then I got sick, and then last year I was just so busy. But I'm dressing up as something this year. Okay, you know the drill. I'm gonna give my face a quick wash and then we're going to get into our first story. The first story that we are reading is called The Haunting of Shinstone, written by Cold Illustrator 383. For context, this is as real as it gets. I'm not a professional and this is not for clicks. I would like to share my encounters. I'll start at the beginning. So at age 3, I was adopted from a neglectful mother and a drug addict father. The conditions that Children's Aid found me and my siblings in was actually pretty horrific. I won't get into the details of that. Long story short, I am Native American, same with all of my siblings. We were put up for adoption. We were adopted to the same family, surprisingly enough. Most of the time, adopted children with siblings are put into separate households. So everything started happening at a very young age. Everything seemed to be going well. Our family finally got to be a family again in a clean family setting. For context, I'm currently 28 years old, but was adopted at 3. I'll start with the history of the house. A big house. 7 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a massive dining room, 2 living rooms, and a pretty big kitchen. On the first floor was the living room and a sunroom. Upstairs had 5 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. All right, this is a funky sentence, so I'm trying. The kitchen and the second living room and the dining room downstairs had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a laundry room. My foster parents were pretty young when they bought the house. both of them in their early 30s. They got the house at an auction for a very, very good deal, just under $200K. When we originally moved in, my parents wouldn't allow us downstairs into the master bedroom. I had snuck downstairs one evening and there was batches of hay that somehow stuck to the wall. The entire floor had been ripped up to reveal a cold concrete floor with symbolic markings all over it. Now, I don't know the history of the house, but I was told that Native Americans had owned it at one point. I am also unaware of any deaths that occurred. The first encounter. At age 8, there were voices that seemed to be something only I would hear, but slowly my siblings started hearing the whispers around them too. They were very angry voices, often swearing and speaking in languages that I myself couldn't understand. Almost gibberish, if you ask me. It scared me for a time. My parents heard me speaking to them one day and got spooked, but thought nothing of it. The first thing that scared all of my siblings and me happened when we were in our bedrooms, grounded. I don't specifically remember why we were all grounded, but once our foster mom would go downstairs to her room, we would all sit in our doorways and goof around. Me and my brother Bailey and my 2 sisters in the doorway. As we were all whispering back and forth, the picture frame at the end of the hallway fell and hit the floor. We were all startled and looked back in the direction of the noise, and to our surprise, there was a shadowy tall figure standing at the end of the hall in broad daylight. As quick as it happened, the thing quickly moved off and out of sight. At the sound of the picture frame falling down and breaking, my mother rushed upstairs to see what had happened. She stood at the end of the hallway and started yelling at us. Who did this? Obviously, it hadn't been any of my siblings or myself, so I simply spoke up and said that there was a man made of shadows that had done it. My siblings spoke up as well, and we all told the same story. My mother was extremely upset as the painting was done by her grandmother and had been in her possession for a very long time. She said, "There is no shadow man that did this. There is no such thing as ghosts." She quickly pointed at me and my brother and told us to follow her downstairs while she did the laundry. So we walked down the hallway. My mother had grabbed a hamper of full dirty clothes and started walking towards the stairs, and we followed behind her. When she reached the first steps, something happened to this day that still scares the shit out of me. I watched as she somehow was thrown down the stairs. She didn't trip. She didn't fall. I watched as she cleared every single step, like somebody had thrown her. She hit the bottom of the stairs, landing in the front entrance, first floor of the house. She immediately started crying, with a look of horror on her face. The very next day, she went to the closest native reservation. She bought all the tools and smudges and blessed the house of all the negativity and/or spirits. It became a religion in the house after that day, to smudge the house and us. As for how well it worked, whatever spirit roams the house is strong enough to physically touch and destroy things in the house. A strong spirit. The next encounter I had was a few months later, and me and my brother were being sent to bed at roughly 8 that evening, and we were in our beds when we heard walking in the hallway outside of our door. At first we thought it was our mom or dad, listening to see if we were fooling around. After the footsteps reached our door, we heard 3 little taps on the outside of our door, like somebody had just knocked. Me being me, I got out of bed and walked over to the doorway and asked, "Mom?" No answer. So I opened the door and nobody was there. The entire upstairs was empty and everybody was in their room for school the next day. I closed the door, a little spook, and tried to brush it off as something rational, to try and not spook my younger brother. But I just couldn't. None of what just happened made any sense. A couple hours later, we were woken up to scratching outside of our door. It was loud. My brother immediately started screaming for our mom, who rushed up the stairs in a panic and whipped open our door to find my brother crying. She tried to comfort my brother, but couldn't, so she took him with her to bed and left me with whatever was knocking and scratching at our door. That's when my sliding closet made a loud thud, and I myself was basically in tears, just waiting for somebody or something to come out of my closet. It never did, thankfully. I do know that demonic spirits feed off of fear and negativity, so what happens next to this day still scares me. I was probably 10 or 11 years old at the time, and me and my brother were watching a scary movie on the TV in the downstairs living room, scared shitless by the end of the movie. We both moved as a group to our bedroom, starting by shutting off the TV and turning off the light. We worked our way to the kitchen, where I started pouring a glass of water for myself. We both got our glasses of water and started heading towards the kitchen exit to go to our bedrooms. From the kitchen doorway, you can see down the foyer, down the stairs and into the living room. We both looked downstairs as we were leaving the kitchen to see the light had been turned back on, and the TV was playing a random channel, and a chair was sitting dead center in the middle of the room. Weird, right? I thought so too. My brother, being scared to move, wouldn't go with me to check it out. So I gathered all the courage I possibly could and started heading for the TV room. When I got down the stairs, I ran into the TV room. I turned off the TV again and then ran for the light and switched that off too. As I was leaving the TV room, I looked into the darkness of the sunroom. Dim lighting from the moon was coming through the windows in the sunroof. And there, standing in the doorway of the sunroom inside the house, was the exact same shadow person that me and all my siblings had seen prior when my mom was pushed down the stairs. 7 foot tall, full body, arms, legs, hand, head. I could see the outline of its fingers, and it just stood there, staring at me. I froze in fear for a second, staring at it as it stared right back at me. I couldn't see its eyes, but I had a feeling it was looking at me. I ran so fast that I tripped up the stairs and was gasping for air in the middle of a full-blown anxiety attack. My fight or flight had kicked in, and I wasn't sticking around to see what that thing wanted. My brother, standing in the kitchen with the light on, started running for our bedroom at the sight of me running from whatever I had just seen in the sunroom. When we made it to the room, we shut the door and locked it. We both slept with the light on that night and slept with the blankets over our head. The next few nights, we heard it walking around the house. We knew what it was, we just didn't want to believe that whatever the thing was actually in the house, still manifesting itself. There's a lot more to the story that I'd like to write here on Reddit. I will do 2 parts. Fast forward to when I was 15, the glass of the sunroof had misted over the years, so my mother had the glass replaced. I was laying down on the sunroom floor, looking through the new panel of glass after the contractors had left and cleaned up. At first, everything was fine. That was, until I noticed something very strange. A massive handprint. The fingers were abnormally long. I mean, this thing was probably like 1.5 feet in length. A massive, greasy, giant handprint. I asked my mother, hey, when the contractors left, he cleaned the glass, right? My mom responded with, yes, dear, why? I showed her the handprint, and we both stood there just staring at it. She still, to this day, 2024, smudges that house on the daily, and we still experience paranormal things. As for the rest of the story, I still to this day experience stuff, my brother more so. I have a lot more to post here on Reddit, and will probably post the second portion of the story in a few days to follow, with my last big experience being 2 years ago. Anyways, thanks for reading. If you have any insight on what I just posted or questions, feel free to DM me. So that's all scary. That's scary. You know, I think the first red flag, well, who knows, right? The parents bought this 5-bedroom house, I think that's what it said, for $200,000. Of course, I don't know when it was purchased. Things are much more expensive now, but that sounds like a steal. And you would wonder why such a big, glorious house with a sunroom would sell so cheaply. Also, the strange markings that she saw in her parents' bedroom. I'm sure her parents have some freaky stuff happen in that bedroom. Holy water and a priest would be called. I hope this user posts more. I'm interested. I think it's so funny because I don't know if anybody else does this. I think it's like a common understanding that everyone does this, but like when you're downstairs at night and you have to go back upstairs, you have to turn off all the lights and you like run up the stairs so that nobody grabs you. I think it's funny that, you know, they talked about doing the same thing because, like, you know, it's just spook because you have to turn your back to the darkness. No, thank you. No, thank you. Okay, let me wash my face and then we will go into our next story. Our next story is called My First and Last Hunting Trip, written by Johan66. Very excited to do this again. It's the Hello Kitty pumpkin face mask. It's like so slimy and I don't want to rip it. They like kitty. There's leaves on it. This is so cute. There's little pumpkins and leaves. All right, let me put it on. Woo! Cute. So much liquid. All right, sweet. My first and last hunting trip. I'm 24 years old and live on my own. My parents have never been around, staying stuck between rehab and jail. So I've had to fend for myself ever since I was young. I have 2 jobs at the moment, one at a restaurant and another washing cars. So it's safe to say that things can be pretty stressful. But regardless, I always keep pushing forward. One night, however, I have to admit my patience was severely tested. While bussing tables at my restaurant job, some teenagers were getting a little too rowdy. They were sitting in a booth laughing and yelling, obviously disturbing the other customers. I had already been sent to warn them once, but I guess it did no good. I understand trying to have a good time, but they were downright annoying. I approached the table with a stern look and reminded them to keep it down. That's when one of the teens stood up and defended his antics. He told me they had just come from prom and they were trying to hang out, and that I needed to step off before he got really mad. This close to him, I could smell the alcohol on his breath. I knew I needed to be cautious around a drunk kid, but we had rules to follow. I told him if he didn't keep it down, they would have to leave. Just then, a cocky smirk crawled across his face. Before I could react, he picked up his drink and threw it on me. Now soaked in cheap soda, my patience went right out the window. I grabbed that little punk and was about to show him a thing or two about respecting his elders. Fortunately for that brat, my boss would grab and drag me to the back. The very wise and patient owner looked at me inside. He told me that he had never seen me so angry before. I quickly reminded him that someone's beverage was thrown in my face. He shook his head, telling me that wasn't it. For the past few weeks, he had been watching and could tell I was going through some things. This man had run restaurants all his life and knew a thing or two about stress. And maybe I was. I never got any days off, and if I did, I didn't have anyone to spend them with. Working and giving every cent you have to bills would stress anyone out. My boss would implore me to take a week off from everything and just enjoy some me time. I told him time off wouldn't pay the bills, but he wouldn't take no for an answer, telling me that I was being taken off the schedule for a week and that I needed to go home and get some rest. Now, back at my place, I felt a bit lost. Working was sort of my life, and now I was forced to come home. The next thing I knew, someone was knocking at my door. I got up to greet them, hoping it wasn't my landlord. Instead, standing before me was my spoiled cousin, Carl. Carl came from a well-off family and got everything he wanted. Nice truck, a beautiful home, and loads of firearms. He was an avid outdoorsman and killed more wildlife than the law should allow. And he was one of the only family members that had anything to do with me. So I put up with him and sometimes enjoyed his company. I was going to tell him how crappy my day was, but he was here for something else. Carl told me he rented a cabin in the woods for a hunting trip and wanted me to go. He knew I wasn't a hunter, but I guess he wanted someone to tag along. Usually I'd say no and tell him how busy I was, but this time I had absolutely nothing else to do. And maybe a vacation would be just what the doctor ordered. So I shrugged my shoulders and told Carl I would go. He was pretty happy, and I was just hoping to blow off some much needed stress. So the very next day, Carl and I headed into the wilderness. While I planned to just lounge around the cabin, Carl brought every firearm he had. The so-called hunting trip could have been mistaken for a war party. Carl was so headset on helping me bag my first deer, but I wasn't really interested. Upon arrival, he went inside and unpacked. The cabin was so nice. Way too rich for my blood. There were deer heads with beautiful antlers mounted on every wall. An old fireplace that gave a rustic and cozy feel. Not to mention a literal bearskin rug stretched out across the wooden floor. In all honesty, I was glad I came. The decor alone was worth it. Always looking for a good time, Carl was quick to pull out the beers and place one in my hand. Now in vacation mode, I was happy to oblige. So we threw some logs in the fireplace and sat around talking about life. I vented to him about how hard it was always working, and he gloated about his many guns. It was actually a pretty nice conversation, all things considered, but then the alcohol started to kick in. Carl could never handle his liquor. As the tops popped, he seemed to get a little more irritable with each sip. We started a friendly chat that led to him harassing me. First, it was how I worked so hard that I didn't have a life. Then he prattled on about how I didn't have any friends but him. I tried not to pay him any mind, but his words hurt. I couldn't help the cards I was dealt, and he should have known that. He knew full well how difficult my parents had always been. Knowing I was about to punch him in the nose, I had to get away. I told Carl that maybe I'd try hunting since he loves it so much. I grabbed one of his mini rifles and left him to his drunkenness. Again, I had never hunted in my life, but anything was better than being insulted. Outside, I noticed that it was getting dark and a little cold, though I probably shouldn't have. I persisted anyway. The forest was so deep and seemed to swallow me up. I could hear the sound of twigs cracking and small animals scurrying. While peaceful for some, I had to admit I was nervous. Being this far out in the wilderness was definitely new for me. I didn't plan to kill anything, so I don't even know why I brought the rifle. Perhaps if I came upon a bear, I would have something to scare it away with. As I walked deeper, the silence seemed to get worse. It was like I was on a newly discovered planet all by my lonesome. After a few moments, I came upon something odd. Sticking out from the bushes, I could see what looked like deer antlers. Feeling excited, I decided to go a little bit closer. As I did, however, I discovered something awful. Laying in the bushes was indeed a deer, albeit one that was ripped apart. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The graceful animal had been brutalized. Blood was everywhere. I'll save the dirty details for those of you who are squeamish. It was so bad that I fell to the ground and began to vomit. What could have done this to that poor animal? It was just so violent. Before I could gather my bearings, footsteps, rattling, that of thunder, approached me. I didn't know if it was another hunter or an angry grizzly, but I wasn't going to wait around. I turned back hoping to leave, but it was too late. Standing before me was something that I couldn't comprehend. It was a massive ape-like creature that stood over 8 feet tall. It had dark brown matted hair with 2 glowing red eyes. The creature's hands were covered in blood and chunks of meat hung from its mouth. Putting 2 and 2 together, I figured out that the deer was its prey, and the idiot that interrupted his meal was me. With fire in its eyes, it backhanded me so hard that both my feet left the ground. This resulted in my cousin's rifle flying in the opposite direction. Now, laying on my back, all I could see were stars. In all my life, I had never been hit so hard. I would once again attempt to flee, but it was obvious that I had a concussion. I also reached for my forehead and felt a large gash, one that was gushing blood and took away my vision. Regardless of all the pain I was in, I didn't want to die here. I attempted to crawl to safety, but those colossal footsteps weren't far behind. I had never believed in monsters, but this thing was real and it was mad. I crawled and crawled, certain that it was toying with me. At one point, it let out an evil grunt, one that almost sounded like laughter. I was sure this was it for me, murdered by a cryptid. What a way to go. But as luck would have it, fate had other plans. While trying to slink away, my hand touched something hard. I almost couldn't believe my eyes. It was Carl's rifle. With the monster on my tail, I grabbed the gun and didn't hesitate. I shot at the creature, hitting his massive chest. Upon impact, the monster backed away from me, clutching its right side. I could see the blood and smoke pouring from its wound. He let out a pained howl before dropping to one knee. Since it was grounded, I knew now was my time to flee. Thanks to an adrenaline boost, I could no longer feel my wounds, so I ran, too terrified to look back. I wouldn't stop until I reached the end of those woods. I ran into the long cabin where my cousin was cleaning his other gun. Seeing the gash on my forehead and terror on my face, he figured I'd been mauled by a bear. I told him my story, and for the most part, he seemed to believe me. At the hospital, I tweaked my tail a little bit, not wanting them to commit me. I still can't believe what happened out there. Creatures like that shouldn't exist, and I had a feeling that howl meant something, like he was calling for help. If I'm right, that means there's more of them. This thought alone is enough to keep me out of the woods for the rest of my life. Cryptids. I've done a few videos on cryptids. I'll link those somewhere if you want to watch the few that I've done. I don't know how I feel. I feel like there's so many stories that there's some truth to it. That there is possibly some truth to all of the cryptid tales and stories, such as Loch Ness Monster, Mothman, and mermaids, for example. I think there's a little bit of truth, like, you know, sometimes when the light's just right, you think you see something, but maybe somebody really did. I don't know. That sounds really scary. As someone who is from a place with a lot of wooded area, the woods scare me at night. I have also only been hunting once. My grandfather took me when I was little, and I freaked out, and I have not gone back. It's just not for me. It's not how I want to spend my time. But that's pretty spook. Especially like the gash and the blood like messing with his vision. That's scary. And head wounds bleed a lot. So yeah. Also, working 2 jobs, I do it. I guess you could count like 3 or 4 jobs, honestly, that I have. It definitely takes a toll on you. I understand that stress for sure. I hope this writer can get a break, if it's not just a story. I hope they can get some downtime, work on their stress. Yeah, that Hello Kitty mask really just leaves your face shiny. I got it at Marshall's. Now I'm putting on these candy corn under eye patches. I love themed things, like holiday typed things. Are you kidding? They didn't come off on the tray. Back. Holiday type things, like, yes, these are under eye masks, but like, make them fun. Make them holiday-y. That's what I would do if I had a skincare line. Definitely do seasonal things like this. Or year round, because I love Halloween. All right, our last story is called Mandy and the Ghost. When I moved in with my grandma about 5 years ago, I didn't know what to expect. Grandma had been living alone since Grandpa died earlier that year, and when they diagnosed her with dementia when I was a senior in high school, it seemed like a bad omen. Though they had caught it early, the doctors had suggesting that living alone would probably only help her condition deteriorate faster. Dementia patients often see their condition slow when they have company. Your mother has lived alone since your father died, and if someone were able to live with her, I think the ability to have someone to talk to would help her immensely. Mom and Dad had looked at each other, not sure what to do about the situation, but seemed to come to a decision pretty quickly. With me looking at college and them unable to afford housing in the dorms, they offered me a compromise. Live with my grandma and attend college nearby, or spend some time trying to get scholarships and grants to pay for my own housing. Grandma and I had always been close, and she was delighted to let me stay with her while I attended college. There was no worry that I would sneak boys in or throw parties. I wasn't really someone who did that sort of thing, and they knew that I would be home most evenings studying or resting for the coming day. I moved in at the beginning of the academic year, and that meant I was there for Halloween. Grandma and I had been living pretty harmoniously, only butting heads a few times when I came home late from classes. Grandma liked to be in bed by 9, and she didn't like to be woken up when I came in late. Grandma liked to spend most of her time in bed, watching TV and knitting, but I still came in when I had the chance to talk with her and visit. Some days she knew who I was. Some days she thought I was my mom, but she was never hostile or confused with me. If she called me by my mom's name, I was Claire, and if she called me by my name, then I was Julia. Either way, we talked about our day and about life in general. I learned a lot of family secrets that way, things that she was surprised I didn't remember, and I was glad for this time with her while she was still lucid. So when I came in to find her putting candy in a bowl, I was shocked. She was out of bed. She was huffing and puffing, clearly exhausted. And I wondered when she had time to buy the candy. She didn't drive, didn't have a car, and I didn't remember buying it. She looked up happily, holding the bowl out to greet me. "Claire, there you are!" I wanted to hand out candy to the kids, but I feel so weak. I must be coming down with something, but I can't disappoint the kiddos. Grandma seemed to forget that she was pushing 65 and not in what anyone would call good health. When she did too much and ran out of energy, she always said the "must be coming down with something" and took herself off to bed rest. And it seemed to be her mind's way of explaining it. Somehow, it seemed, I had forgotten it was Halloween, but Grandma hadn't. It wasn't that surprising. If there was one thing you could count on Grandma to remember, it was Halloween. Grandma had always been in love with Halloween, at least according to Mom. She'd insisted I decorated earlier in the month. She made us get a pumpkin from the store, which I then carved and sat on the stoop, and if she had been in better health, she would have likely been in a costume handing out candy. As it stood, she was lucky to have made it from her room to the table, and she knew it. I took the bowl and told her not to worry, and that I would make sure the kids got their candy. She thanked me and went to lie down, her energy spent. I went to the porch and put out the bowl of candy. I put a note on the stool so the kids knew it was a 2-piece limit, and came back in to study. Today might be sugar palooza for the little goblins out there, but for me, tomorrow was my chem midterm and I needed to study. I was doing well, but this was only freshman year. I had big dreams, and they would be harder to fulfill with poor marks in chemistry. I heard the kids shrieking and giggling as they came up the road, heard their footsteps on the porch, heard the step pause in speculation as they read the sign, and then heard them retreat after they took their candy. Grandma lived in a fairly nice area, and the kiddos seemed used to the 2-piece rule. I'm sure some of them took a handful and ran, but seemed to be in the minority if they did. It was dark out and probably pushing 9 when I heard a knock on the door. I looked up from my book, peering at the door, as I saw the outline of a little kid in a ghost costume. He was standing there patiently, bag in hand, and I wondered how he had missed the bowl in the sign. Maybe he was looking for an authentic experience, or maybe he was special needs. Either way, I got up and walked over to the door to see what he wanted. I opened the door to find a kid in an honest-to-God bedsheet ghost costume. He looked right out of a Charlie Brown special, and the shoes poking out from the bottom looked like loafers. He held a grubby pillowcase in one hand and a candy apple in the other, and when he looked up at me through the holes in his sheet, I almost laughed. He looked like a caricature, like a memory of a Halloween long ago, and I wasn't sure he would speak for a moment. When he did, I wished he hadn't. His voice was raspy and amused, and it sucked all the joy out of me. "Is Maddie here?" he asked, and I shook my head as I tried to get my own voice to work. "Nah, sorry, kiddo. There's no Maddie here." He nodded and then turned and left with slow, somber steps. I thought it was odd. He hadn't even taken any candy. And when I closed the door and went back to my work, I was filled with a strange and unexplainable sense of dread. I had forgotten about it by the time Halloween rolled around again, but the little ghosts hadn't forgotten about us. October 31st found me, once again, sitting at the table and studying for a midterm. I was still working on my prerequisites for biochem, and if everything went as planned, I'd be starting the course next year. Grandma was much the same, maybe a little more tired and a little more forgetful, but we still spent a lot of evenings chatting and watching TV. Sometimes she braided my hair, and sometimes she showed me how to knit, but we always spent at least an hour together every evening. Tonight, she had turned in early, saying she was really tired and wanted to get some rest before this cold caught up to her. I had set the candy bowl on the front porch, careful to add the usual note, and when someone knocked on the door at 8:30, I looked up to see the same little silhouette I had seen the year before. I got up telling myself it couldn't be the same kid. But when I opened the door, there he was. The same bedsheet ghost costume, the same faux leather loafers, the same bulge around the eyes to indicate glasses, the same slightly dirty pillowcase. It was him, just as he had been the year before. I almost prayed he wouldn't remember before speaking. "Is Maddie here?" he asked in the same croaking voice. I tried not to shudder as I smiled down at him. "Sorry, kiddo, wrong house." He nodded solemnly, turned around, and slowly walking back to the front walk as he made his way back to the street. I watched him go, not quite sure what to make of this strange little ghost boy or his apparent lack of growth. The kid looked like he might be 5 or 6. though his voice sounded like he might be 5 or 6 years in the grave. I briefly considered that he might be a real ghost, but I put that out of my mind. It was that time of year, nothing more. I went back to studying, finished out the evening by visiting with Grandma when she got up from her nap unexpectedly. We drank cocoa and watched a scary movie, and I fell asleep beside her in the bed she had once shared with my grandpa. The next year saw the return of the little boy, and he was unchanging. I tried to ask him why he kept coming back after being told she wasn't here for 2 years running. I wanted to ask him why he thought she was here, but I couldn't bring myself to ask him anything. There was a barrier between us that went deeper than a misunderstanding, and it was like we were standing on opposite sides of a gulf and shouting at each other over the tide. He left without saying anything, nodding, as he always did before disappearing into the crowd. I didn't see him the year after that, but to be fair, I was a little preoccupied. That was my 4th year in college, and I was only a year from graduating and moving on to work in the field of biochemistry. I had been heading home when a colleague of mine invited me to a little department party. I was helping my teacher as a TA, and the other TAs were having a little get-together in honor of the season. I started to decline, but I thought it might be fun. I had never really allowed myself to get into the college scene, never really partied or hung out with any friends, and all that focus takes a toll sometimes. I really hadn't been to a social gathering since high school, and I was curious to see what it was like. I'll admit, I indulged a little bit more than I should have. But when I came home and found my grandmother lying on the front door, it sobered me up pretty quickly. Her doctor said that she had fallen when she tried to get the door, and I couldn't help but wonder if she had been going to answer the knocking of a certain little ghost boy. They kept her in the hospital for nearly 3 months, monitoring her and making sure she hadn't given herself brain damage or something. Her condition progressed while she was in the hospital, and after that time, she either only recognized me as my mother or didn't recognize me at all. She began asking for Albie, always looking for Albie, but I didn't know who that was. Mom was puzzled too, wondering if she was maybe talking about her dad, whose name was Albert. I'd never heard her call him Albie, but I suppose it could be a nickname. They knew each other as children, so it's entirely possible. After a while, they sent her home, but the prognosis was not good. They gave her less than a year to live, saying she would need round-the-clock care from now on. I didn't need to be asked this time. I felt guilty for not being there, and I knew that I had to be there for her now. I took a leave of absence from school, putting my plans on hold so I could take care of my grandma. I continued to take some courses online, hoping to not get too far behind, but I devoted most of my time to her. She was mostly unresponsive, whispering sometimes as she called for Albie, or her mother and father, great-grandparents I had never met. She talked to Albie about secret places and hidden treasures, and her voice was that of a little girl now. She had regressed even more, and every day that I woke, I found her breathing was a blessing. Grandma proved them wrong, and when Halloween came around again, I was in for a surprise. I had taken to sleeping on a cot at the foot of her bed, keeping an ear out for any sounds of trouble, but a loud clatter from the kitchen had me rolling to my feet and looking around in confusion. I looked at the bed and saw she was still in it, so the sound couldn't have been her. As another loud bang sounded in that direction, I was off and moving before I could think better of it. I was afraid that an animal had gotten into the house. No burglar would have made that much noise, and when I came into the kitchen, I saw, just for a second, the furry black backside of some cat or dog or maybe a small bear. As it climbed out of the cabinet it had been rooting in, I saw it was a person. Though it was certainly a grubby one, it was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, and she looked filthy. She was wearing a threadbare black dress with curly-toed shoes and a pointy hat that she scooped off the floor. The longer I watched her, the more I came to understand that she wasn't really dirty, but had covered herself lightly in stove ash for some reason. She didn't seem to have noticed me. She was digging through the cupboards and drawers as she searched for whatever she was after, leaving destruction in her wake. "Hey!" I called out after some of my surprise had faded. "What are you doing?" The girl turned and looked confused as she took me in. "What are you doing here? This is my house. You better leave before my mama sees you and gets mad." She continued to look through things, working her way into the living room, and I followed behind her, not sure what to say. Was this a dream? If it was a pretty vivid one. I could feel the carpet beneath my feet, hear the leaky faucet in the kitchen, smell the lunch I had cooked hours before. The little girl had wrecked half the living room before I shook off my discomfort and asked her what she was looking for. If this was a dream, then I suppose I had to play along. "I need my pillowcase. The one with the pumpkin on it? It's my special Halloween bag. I can't go trick-or-treating without it." I opened my mouth to ask where she left it, but then I stopped suddenly as something occurred to me. I had seen that pillowcase before. It had been in Grandma's closet for ages, and when I offered to wash it for her, she had shaken her head and said, "It has too many memories." There was a pumpkin drawn on one side in charcoal, a black cat on the other side, and a witch's hat in between them. Someone had sewn strings around the top so it could be pulled shut, and it looked like a grubby peddler's sack. Surely, if this was a dream, Grandma wouldn't mind if I gave the child this bag. Maybe that's why she'd been keeping it, just in case this kid came looking for it. I told the girl to wait 1 minute and that I would get it for her. "Okay, but hurry! Halloween won't last all night." It took a little looking, but I finally found it under some old quilts at the top of the closet. At some point, Grandma must have recolored the cat and hat, and I wondered when she had the energy. She hadn't even been out of bed without me by her side in over a year, so she must have done this before her fall. I took the bag out of the living room and held it out to the little girl who was leaning against the sofa. Her eyes lit up, and she snatched it happily as she danced around and thanked me. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," she trumpeted. "Now I can go trick-or-treating as soon as," and as if on cue, a knock came from the door. The little witch ran over and answered it, and I was unsurprised to see a little ghost boy waiting for her. "Maybe," he said happily as she wrapped him in a hug like She hadn't seen him in years. "Albie," she trumpeted in return. "Ready to go?" "For ages, slowpoke," he said, a smile beneath the sheet coming out in his words. The two left the porch hand in hand, disappearing out into the crowd as they went out to go trick-or-treating. I watched them go, feeling a mixture of warmth and completion. And that was when I remembered my grandma. I had left her alone in there for a while, and when I went to check on her, I found her too still in the bed. I started to begin CPR, but after putting a couple of fingers on her throat, I knew it was too late. She was cold. She had likely been dead before I was awoken by the clatter in the kitchen, and I held back tears as I called the ambulance and let my parents know she had passed. The funeral was quick. Grandma was laid next to rest, next to Grandpa, and a week later I was helping Mom clean out Grandma's house. It was my house now. Grandma left it to me in her will, and Mom was packing up some mementos and deciding what to donate. We were going through her closet when I found a box of keepsakes in it. There were pictures of my mom when she was little, wedding photos of my grandma and grandpa, and some letters Grandpa had written to her during Vietnam. Mom came over as I was looking through them, smiling at the pictures and crying a little over the letters, but I felt my breath stick in my throat as I came to a very old photo at the bottom of the box. It was a small photo of two kids in costumes on the front porch of a much different house. One was a ghost, his eye holes bulging with glasses. The other was a witch who had clearly rubbed wood ash on her face. "Julia?" Mom asked, the picture shaking in my hand. "Honey, are you okay?" The picture fell back into the box, and there on the back was the last piece of the puzzle. Madeline and Albert. Halloween, 1960. That was the last time I saw the little witch or the ghost, but when Halloween comes to call, the two are never far from my mind. I always hand out candy and decorate the house, just as Grandma would have wanted. You never know what sort of ghosts and goblins might come to visit. Like, that was scary, but also sad. I'm assuming the granddaughter finds the box of pictures in the keepsake thing. So obviously, Madeline is the grandma, but he calls her Maybe, and she calls him Albie. So maybe that's the nicknames the little kids had for each other. And now it's clicking, because when I read that, I misunderstood something. The mom was saying that the grandma knew the grandpa as a little girl. So obviously that was his ghost. But the fact that they were children was interesting. Maybe, and I know that it was also mentioned in the story. Am I making any sense? I'm jumping around ideas. It was mentioned in the story that Grandma loved Halloween. Like, she was always decorating, doing all the things, yada yada. So maybe their spirits just wanted to trick-or-treat one last time together? I got that right in my mouth. Which is cute and sweet, but also, I don't know. It's a story, right? Story. She's a really good granddaughter. She like stopped going to school to help take care of her grandmother, and I'm sure her grandmother was very appreciative of that. As someone who also loves Halloween, I think it's pretty iconic that she died on Halloween and was able to trick-or-treat as a little girl one more time. Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna cry. But that's just really sweet. It's a sweet little story. Sweet little spooky story. Like, yeah, ghosts, but cute. So that's our last story for today. If you liked this skincare with a scare video, please give it a big thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell to get notified anytime I post. And I will see you here next time. As always, stay spooky, my friends. I'm sure you can hear that. That's my upstairs neighbor. I can't do anything about it. Maybe if I got a mic, but with my camera that I film with, I can't attach a mic. It's only the built-in mic, which is so annoying. So I have to get a new camera. Like, that's so loud. And I've just gotten used to it because I've been here for 3 years, but I want to move. I don't want to hear that anymore. Sorry, my camera battery died. I had to put in a new battery just to do my closing spiel. Anyways, loud. I want to move. Thanks for watching. I'll be here next time. As always, stay spooky, my friends. My whole ending wrap up just got messed up because my battery died, whatever. I hope you have a great night. Be kind to yourself. Do something spooky. Halloween is almost here. Actually, it is here. Bye!